welcome to Speaking and Speech with Kiki. This is lesson 6. Today we're going to talk about pauses, which seems counterintuitive, but pausing and not speaking is also part of public speaking and is a tool that you can use to make great presentations. So let's talk about that. Before we do that though, let's go back and talk about what the last lesson was all about. I hope you remember, right? The last lesson was about smiling and eye contact. The reason for smiling can be a cultural thing. If in your country maybe smiling is seen as for children or for just cameras, when you're taking a picture, that's fine. That's what I'm talking about is a little bit different. I'm referring to smiling when it comes to public speaking for an audience that is either mixed or has mostly Westerners. Westerners view smiling as very important. Really very important. Even if you're in a serious situation, even if you're talking about serious things, you don't have to smile the whole time. But when you are welcoming or when you're greeting people, I'm happy to be here. Even though the situation is not a good one, I'm happy I'm here with you. That's part of the relationship building process of the conversation. You read the pronunciation section. They mention that smiling changes your voice. Your voice sounds one way to people when you're not smiling, and it sounds a different way when you are smiling, and people respond to that. Okay. Leave a comment below. Let me know. Are you a smiler? I mean, when I walk down the street in Korea, people are not smiling. They just aren't. In America, most cities, not New York City, but most cities, if you go down the street, people are like, hi, hi, hi. Lots of smiling. A lot of eye contact. If you make eye contact, usually you have to say hello. Eye contact and smiling are tools used in Western society to be polite. They can be different in different cultures. Let me know. Leave me a comment about your culture and what they do. Now, let's talk about pausing. When you're in a conversation with somebody, pausing is also important, but it can be kind of awkward. It gives the other person a chance to let their brain catch up to what they're thinking about, what the next thing they want to say is. Pauses keep an overall pace. Yeah? If you're speaking too much, then the information can get lost because the audience doesn't have time to process it. Those pauses are there for you just as much as they're there for the audience. You have a lot of information that you want to give. Pausing gives you a chance to get back to the key point. If you're talking and you're giving an example, your example's going, you can then pause and then say, all right, what's my next point? You can even go and go back up. Instead of going, next we're going to, instead of doing all that, you can just pause. You just pause and give yourself a moment. It's very awkward. It's very embarrassing when you're on a stage and people are expecting you to talk, but even if it seems extremely, extremely embarrassing. All right. So pauses can also convey emotion, like drama. When you're watching a movie, there's not always conversation. There's not always even action. In fact, there's sometimes just a scene, they're looking at each other. Those moments are so important because there's a lot of emotion there that doesn't need any language. Talked about big hand gestures. They're too much. You can use them. In fact, there are times when you should use them, when you are being funny, when you're being dramatic, when you feel you need something to really emphasize what you're saying. If you talk like a normal person for 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then suddenly put your hand on your heart and stare off into the horizon and think just silently, and then talk about our country, something national, it's very dramatic, and people will get caught up in the feeling because we're human, and people will laugh and they'll say, haha, that's so cheesy, but it made them laugh, it made them think about it, it changed the mood. So there's times for those kinds of big pauses, theatrical pauses, big gestures. Those are all tools in your toolbox. Okay, so pauses can be emotional. Think about pauses in the way that think about punctuation in written language. In English, a lot of little sentences can be put together, but they get little commas in them. And each comma is a short break, pause. Think about when you're saying a list. If you have on your card, you have a list of things that you want to say, then where a comma would be in the written language, you're going to pause. For example, I want to talk about comma pauses, periods, like at the end of a sentence, and paragraph change. All of those will get pauses. I'm like giving you the information and I'm doing it at the same time. I'm so excited. All right. So the next one is a sentence pause, and that would be where the period is, right? If there's a period at the end of the sentence, you take a pause that's a little bit longer. Okay. The first one is a comma, and the second one is a period. When you're practicing your pausing, you can decide how long each pause is going to be. Just make sure that where the comma would be, the clause pause, is shorter than the period pause. The period pause, where the period in a sentence would be, that one's going to be a little longer. Okay. And a paragraph pause. A paragraph pause is going to be the longest because you're going from one idea to the next idea. All right, other kinds of pauses, there's going to be a pause for emphasis. The next thing you're going to say is really important. You really want to make sure your audience is listening. One way to get that attention is to simply stop talking. Everyone's attention is now refocused. Say your important thing and then pause again. That second pause is there to indicate to people that piece of information stands there between two pauses because it's that important. That's emphasis. That means you don't have to do the big, grand hand gesture, right? You don't have to do that. You can use silence, also powerful. All right. After a rhetorical question. In presentations, we also use rhetorical questions. We use them as a tool, so we will talk about them in a later lesson. For now, just know when we're asking a question, even if we're not expecting a response because this is a presentation, we still pause to give the audience a chance to think about what would their answer be. We want our sales to go up, don't we? You're not waiting for them to go, yeah! That's a rhetorical question. The answer is, of course we want our sales to go up, right? So, rhetorical question. Here the point is just, we pause at the end of that question even though we're not expecting an answer. It's like, this is like a preview to another lesson. Okay. The next one is when you have a presentation that has visual effects, you want to pause for the visuals right before you bring on your visual. If you start talking about what's on the chart before people can see the chart, that can be confusing.